Okay, we're going to call to order the Tuesday, March 7th Trades Licensing Board meeting. Roll call has been taken. Everyone was notified electronically of the meeting minutes. I'll take a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Motion by Bill Panitsky. Is there a second? Second by Todd Dietrich. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? So moved. The motion passes. Second on the agenda is public comment. We have public comment today. First on the public comment list is Mr. Ron Yaros. Mr. Yaros, please approach the podium. Good afternoon, Mr. Yaros. You have 10 minutes.
Okay.
You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, board. I'm going to try to go through this quick. I have a lot of information here. My name is Ron Yaros. I've been working in the trades for over 20 years. I grew up in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, in the shadow of what is now the Shell cracker plant is 1 mile from where I grew up. So industry's been pretty much around my life, my whole life. My father was a union pipe fitter. He started his career in local 115, which turned into local 47, and then ended up in 449. He just 62 years. My father has been pipe fitter. He's still active politically. He didn't want me, in his words as a young man, I don't want you to have to get dirty like I did when I was a kid. So he encouraged me to go to college, which I did. That's how I ended up coming to Erie. I went to Gannon, played football at Gannon. I transferred to Mercyhurst, played hockey at Mercyhurst. I got a hotel restaurant degree. I play in bands. I've done that my whole life. So I did that in Erie. After college, I was a professional musician touring, and then took a job for a guy doing water treatment. We worked in 9 states doing water treatment, and mostly on Amish properties. The guy had a valve that did not require electricity. So we got to learn about all Amish water systems and traveled 9 different states. It came time where I was going to move to New Orleans, and then I found out I was going to be a father. Surprise in everybody's life. So it came time to grow up, so I went back to the trade. So I went back to being a plumber. I worked for HRI, installing commercial kitchens for a while. I worked for H. Jack Langer. He had me work at his Erie shop, his Cleveland shop, and his Jamestown office. While I was there, I acquired a journeyman's license in Jamestown. After working for him, I got married and worked for David J. Haller Construction. I did all aspects of construction, custom home building. I worked, his plumber was Jim Greasehober, which you guys probably know. And Jim did all of his city stuff. I did most of his stuff that was outside the city, but I learned a lot from Jim, and we would do all of his dirty work, all the demos, stuff like that. And ended up, after doing that, working for TJ's Plumbing. I was his first employee when he actually opened in Erie. I handled all of his calls. And then eventually he laid me off. I was unemployed. Really looking for work. TJ, Mr. Sandell, you might remember like 10 years ago I came trying to get a job in the union. I was really looking for work. I was a single dad, divorced, 2 daughters, and really looking for work. At that time, at the end of George Bush and when Barack Obama came in office, if you can remember the recession, there wasn't anything going on. And the guys from Local 27 came up. I interviewed with them at the Union Hall. Nothing came of it. I was looking for work. A friend of mine introduced me to another friend named Steve Chiz, who had a company called Advanced Testing. He did backflow testing. And there was a rule change at that time stating that anyone who was doing backflow testing needed to become a journeyman plumber and work under a master plumber. So after 7 years of doing his work, he had to change what he had to do in order to comply with what the city and the code and the waterworks wanted. So he hired a master plumber to work for him. He hired me, a journeyman plumber. I got backflow certified, and then learned everything there is to know about the backflow business over the next 8 or 9 years. Since I was already a up and working plumber, we started doing plumbing work. We complied with everything the city required of us, and then over 8 years we operated. There were no problems. 8 journeyman's license renewals. I always listed ATS as my employer on my renewals for 9 years. I've got 8,000 backflow tests on the Erie Waterworks system alone, almost 8,000 tests and rebuilds. Anytime our master plumber got a permit, I did the work. It passed every time. Inspector always signed off. I sent an email on March 31st of last year wishing to inquire about upgrading to a master license. And so that's almost a year ago, and here we are now. I was told at the time that I took the master plumber test actually in 2012, And I tried to get a master's license back in 2012, 10 years ago, and I was denied because they told me my master license from a different jurisdiction would not transfer to this jurisdiction. The code book clearly stated you have to have a journeyman in the same jurisdiction you're trying to get a master license. So I was denied, and at that point I didn't even have a journeyman's license in the city of Erie, so I took the journeyman's test, became a journeyman 10 years ago, and that's the point I wanted to just make sure I was following the rules and comply so there were no surprises going down the road. I talked to, they needed to see, in the letter I got in the email, you can see they needed proof of employment and they needed basically to see that proof of hours. So I basically talked to Andy to see exactly what it was that he wanted. And I was told a couple different things at that time. He told me at one point that he wanted to see W-2s, but the way we operated our business, I was an hourly employee, I got paid by the hour, but I got 1099 at the end of the year. I didn't have W-2s. And he explained that they kind of wanted to see W-2s, and he told me, well, if you can show me 1099s that Denny, our master plumber, paid you directly, he told me he would actually give me a master's license if I could just show him 1099s I got paid directly. Obviously, I didn't have that. But I told him I had proof of all my hours, logs, emails, and everything, and he said, send me what you have. And at that point, after 9 years of operating, I didn't realize there was any problem, as speak of the way we were doing our business. So, I gave him all the proof of hours, and I would have loved to go over this with Andy, because for some reason I tried to meet with him, and I have not physically seen Andy in person since pre-pandemic. When applying for a master license, I find it important, the way my information is presented, I wanted to kind of present it to him, piece it together to show him how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I was never able to go in. He was so busy I could never get in to see him. And so from March 31st, fast forward, I submitted my materials in June, and for 5 months I didn't hear anything. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. So I couldn't get a hold of him, and nobody had an answer. So I contacted the mayor's office, and the planning coordinator went down and kind of asked him what was going on, and then that's when I got my denial letter saying I didn't have enough proof. So I just assumed he would call me with any questions, which he did not, unfortunately. And I think if I would have met with him before, it would save me from going through all this. I think he could see it's obvious that I have 9,000 hours, over 9,000 logged hours. If I had any idea that there was, like, my hours would not count, I would have tried to take action to remediate it, like I didn't think. Since I did 8,000 tests, the Erie Water Works requires you be working under a master plumber and a journeyman. Every time we got a permit, it was passed. Like, a reasonable person and myself had no idea that there was like any kind of a discrepancy with the way I was getting paid. And if that was the case, I would have wished the code enforcement or somebody would have notified me or notified Denny or notified Steve, because I guess what they want to see now, or what you guys would like to see now, W-2s have workman's comp on the employee and that kind of thing. But at that time I was operating, it was never required. If it was, nobody ever told me. I always carried my own insurance, all my own tools, my own van, so I was technically an hourly employee but a subcontractor. So that I was just again wondering what the holdup was. So we get to the presentation in my hours. I printed this out. I have 5,000 sheets. I gave a zip drive to Andy. I don't know if he looked at it or didn't see exactly. This basically represents every job I've ever done, because when I kept my hours with Steve, my boss, I emailed him every single job. You can see the plumbing write-ups. A lot of these are backflows, because from 2020 on, we would submit backflows electronically. So I have a paper trail of every single plumbing job with a detailed write-up of customer name, address, and everything from 2015 through 2023. That's also on a zip drive. If anybody would like it, PDF form, I could do it. So, and then I documented all my hours the way I did it, the way we've always done it, old-fashioned way. I would keep them in these books, transfer them to the sheets which I showed you, add everything up, get paid at the end of the month. 9 years later, I'm over 9,300 hours, and I guess the requirement was 5,000, so I didn't think I would have any problems with the amount of hours. So I've done, as stated on the letter, 8,000 backflow tests. Approximately 1/5 of those are rebuilds. I couldn't break up the rebuilds from the testing. Approximately 1,500 hours of rebuilding. So, I got denied, And I'm just asking you guys to look at all of my information, because it's clear I have been operating legally, licensed under a master plumber the entire time I've been with this company. He had a master plumber working for him, which is what was required of him in order for him to do business. He did what they told him to do to comply. And again, later there was some kind of discrepancy of like that we needed to be on a clock and W-2. And if I'd have known that, I would have required he do that immediately, or I wouldn't have taken the job with him in the first place. I would have worked for somebody else. So I just ask that you look at what I presented here. I have a business card. If you have any questions, call me at any time. I have more information if you need it. I provided five 1099s. I could get more. I couldn't find them at the time. It's been a lot of work organizing this to the case it's in. I've spent probably 30 hours organizing this stuff and spent $400 just in printing to get this together to present to you guys. So, you know, I think that I'm obviously qualified. I've been in the trenches for a long time and paid my dues. And since I was denied the master license in 2012 or 2014, I wanted to make sure I was licensed, operating properly under everybody, and was ecstatic that I finally was able to do that so that I can advance my career, hopefully become a master, and you know, have better for my retirement, since I've kind of got into the trade a lot later than most of you guys. Most guys do it right out of school. I didn't really start hitting it hard until I was 30, and I didn't try to become a plumber license until I was 40. I'll be 50 here next month. So please look over what I have. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer it for you. Again, I wish I could have presented this to Andy, and hopefully you can look at it and show that I definitely not only have 5,000 but 9,000 hours, and have been operating properly and under the code. And I think it's pretty obvious that I think I'm put my time in and paid my dues. So I'm not sure if there's any questions, if that's even a thing that could ask the board, or is it just a presentation? If anybody has anything they want to ask me, or
Any questions?
Yes. Hank Rego, you had mentioned that Andy asked you to get you his 1099s for him to review.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I understand it, because I am a sole proprietor, all your tax returns should have your 1099s on there. That's how they do that.
Mm-hmm.
You could have made, do you have copies of those?
well, the copies are in there. So
Copies of the 1099s?
Yes, they're in the material that I submitted. Now, he wanted to see 1099s not from ATS, that was my employer. He wanted to see 1099s from the master plumber. He said, you need to be paid directly from the master plumber, is what he told me. And I didn't think that to be accurate at the time, because he was paying the master plumber and paying me. The master plumber wasn't paying me directly. The company was paying me directly. Like any other situation where the master plumber's on the payroll, the master plumber isn't cutting the employee the check. It's the company that's cutting the check. But you're still working under his license. So he asked me to supply 1099s that the master paid me directly, which was not the case. So I got paid from the company. The company paid the master plumber for the privilege of working under his license, like it's done. I later found very common in this city to do it that way. And I mean, me as the employee, I really wasn't my responsibility to see how the guy I'm working for organizes business. All I knew is I got a schedule every morning. I went out and did it. You know, nobody told me that there was anything, off about how we were operating, because I operated for 9 years. The Waterworks has recognized, no problem. I worked under this master for all that time. And the question was, if there was an issue, I wanted to tell Andy, but I haven't been able to actually talk to him about it. If there was an issue about how the pay was, like I said earlier, why wasn't I notified or anybody notified? He didn't actually say that's the issue. It just said I didn't show enough hours. And when they kind of tried to interpret it under the direct supervision of a master plumber, and some other people try to tell me, that they want to see the W-2s and all that, but I can't find any information on the city. And I wanted to point out, like the Waterworks, I have some in the sheets. The Erie Waterworks, to become a backflow tester, has a sheet. In order to do backflow testing, here's what you need to do. license, certification, calibration of your gauge, ABC. It's clearly laid out. And I hope you guys going forward can develop something like that for this trade or the code enforcement, because there's no information out there for a plumber to find out, hey, what do I exactly need to do in order to become a plumber? What exactly do I need to do to become an electrician? Because I've even looked even as soon as yesterday, and I can't find that information anywhere. It's what I have, and it says work 5,000 hours under a master plumber. You know, it doesn't mention anything about W-2s or workman's comp. It just says 5,000 hours under a master plumber. And since I operated for 9 years without any problem, me or anybody else reasonable wouldn't think there's any issue if my work gets inspected when we pull permits and they pass it and nobody asks any questions and there's no problem. And thousands and thousands of tests at the waterworks, they were literally signed by a master plumber. That sheet had to physically be signed. So his name is literally on the first 6,000 tests that I submitted. So in my mind, I was working under a master plumber because that's what they required of us, so that's how we operated. And I want to do things properly. I know they're changing a lot, requiring licenses and everything. I want to do that. I want to operate properly. Eventually, I'd like to hire a couple guys, possibly open even like a union shop. I was thinking about eventually, since it's been in my family. And I just want to do things and make sure all the ducks are in a row so there's no discrepancies. So that's what I thought I've been doing since 2014. So going forward, I'm here because I want to play by the rules, and as you know, there's a lot of fly-by-nighters out there that are just doing whatever. And I put my head down and paid my dues so that I could be the guy who can get licensed and try to make it through and do everything legally and up to speed so that there's no discrepancies. So.
The plumbers have to apply for a journeyman test and a master's test for the plumbing. There's an application, correct?
Correct.
On the website. Have you filled one of those out?
A long time ago, yes, I did.
I beg your pardon?
I did a long time ago, yes. And I asked them specifically, what if they needed anything from me.
Well, I guess my question is, part of that application has different tasks that have to be completed proficiently to be signed off by the master plumber.
Okay.
I mean, for a master plumber, you'd be responsible for doing all tasks other than
That's correct.
testing backflow.
Oh, I've done, if you look in my write-ups, I've done water services, I've done sewer services, I've done boiler work, I've done gas lines. I've worked every type of well, jet wells, windmills even, cisterns. I mostly, with our business, was mostly service related. So majority of what we did, we didn't require a permit because it's just service, fixing pipes, fixing sinks, changing faucets and that sort of thing. But we did do water services, sewer services. And I had a lot of that experience even when I was back working with TJ. Dave Anderson was the plumber there, and all we did was water services, sometimes 2 a day, and sewer services. So I have a vast experience, and then working with, even in construction, framing, electrical. I've done custom framing, I've done custom home building. I have all those boxes. I'm familiar with what you're saying, because when I originally did that 10 years ago, I did fill out that application, and they had it. And again, I asked, if they needed anything else, and if that's something that's required, I would wish the code office would have made me fill. If that was required, I would have gladly filled out another one. Our master would have gladly signed it if I knew. But all they told me they needed was my proof of employment. Per the email I sent, they needed proof of employment and proof of hours, basically. And I said, if you need any paperwork, I wrote right on everything I submitted. Any questions, if I need any other paperwork, please let me know, because I'll be happy to jump through whatever hoops to get you whatever you need. And all I was told was proof of hours and again, proof of employment, which I got together and did. So, I mean, I do have all of those, what you speak of. I actually had checked all of those boxes 10 years ago. Literally every single one, and they thought I just checked them all, but I literally had that experience, literally on every measure of that.
I do know that it's now an affidavit has to be completed by the person that's doing the checkoffs.
Okay.
Or the initials on the task, so it'd be your master plumber. But I don't know if that's something that, typically we review those every month.
Okay.
Anybody submitting that for a journeyman's license
Yeah.
or for a master's license,
Yes.
it would be a completed form of, and again, it would be a notarized affidavit.
Sure. Well, I did that the first time. apply for the master license. But if, I just thought, I wasn't sure if they needed me to go through that again. If they would, I would have wished they would have told me, because they would have
that copy of that form.
had the old information from the last time. If I'd have known that, I would have had that sitting here for you. And if I could still make that happen, if that's something that's
I
necessary.
think one of the problems too is the 1099, you're not actually working for a plumbing company. You're being paid in a 1099 as
But-
kind of like a subcontractor.
Well, but I'm getting paid hourly, so it's not like he's bidding a job and then I'm doing it. I have a schedule.
But you're not an employee.
I'm not an employee, but
You're a subcontractor.
is that against code, or is my question? Because I've known this all along, and I asked, and they said this is what we needed to do to comply, you know? And if I knew it was required, as I stated, to be a W-2 an employee, I would have forced him to do that or worked for another company. Like, I didn't know that that was an issue. And I can't even see a code, to this day, I can't see a code or a statute anywhere that states you must be a W-2 employee. I've been looking, and I'm trying to get answers, and unfortunately, most of my information I get is at the supply house. And as you know, with the plumbers, you ask 3 plumbers a question, and you get 5 different answers, and a lot of them, they don't know, you know, they don't know the rules, or they say something that I know to be false from studying it. So, and it goes back to me saying it would be very helpful if you guys, if that is required, there should be something that is mailed out to us with our license, like, you must be working however, whatever you require, or W-2 or comp. I would wish somebody would have told me that. And going forward, you should notify all employees that that is required, because I can't find anything on anywhere that states that. You know what I mean? And not that I'm like flouting it. If I have known, I definitely would have either worked for another company or made sure that I was a W-2 employee if I knew if that was even going to be a hint of being a problem down the road. But I didn't find out that it would even possibly be a problem, and for 9 years. It wasn't a problem until I didn't find out it might even be an issue until I tried to apply for the master license. So at that point, what do I do, 9 years, and I put 9 years in and I start all over again from zero? If that's required, it's kind of, I'd like to see that, you know, and I think anybody who's applying would like to see a pretty cut and dry list on what you need to do in order to comply and operate legally, which I thought, and I know that I have been ever since then. So I don't really understand I understand what your concern, but I still did the work, and I was legally working under a master. I mean, we did what the code enforcement and the waterworks said we needed to do to operate legally. So as far as I was concerned, I thought we were good, you know? So I don't know how that makes a difference in my experience because of the way I was compensated. I still have the hours in, you know? But I understand going forward why you would want that. And if I'd have known it, I'd have done it. And if I ever become a blood master and have people working for me, you can be sure that's going to be the case.
Is there any final questions for Mr. Yaros?
I have a question. The master plumber that you did examination back in 5/8 of 12.
Yeah.
That means you were a journeyman before that.
Yeah, I had a
Obviously.
journeyman out of Jamestown.
You were out of, exactly, you had already said you were, so you had a quote master that you were working for then.
Yes.
Did you not ever keep any documentation of the quote 5,000 hours you need for master?
Well,
At
back
that point?
then, I didn't know.
We're going back.
Yeah, I didn't know
15
how it worked back then.
Okay,
I did have proof of all my hours in employment. I don't have that now because it was 10 years ago.
I understand.
But I did submit
That
proof of
needed to
it.
be submitted to do this back in 12, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So when you restarted, you were a journeyman in the city of Erie here, you show 5-6 years of journeyman license. At that point, did you have the same master plumber?
Not for the second 10 years. No.
Okay, but starting from 14 or 15, you've had the same master you've worked under continuously?
For the last 7 of 8 years, it's been the same one.
And at that point, you had no record keeping whatsoever that you worked with him for 8 years?
I
Because
mean,
that was part of the masters back then. You
Right.
did 5,000 hours as a journeyman, under a
Correct.
master. And at that point, you never thought the documentation of that hours?
well, I mean, This is all my
No,
document.
I understand what you have. What I'm saying is, the master has to sign off, is what he was saying. So, if you had the same master for 7 years, and you were doing work with him, at that point, did he ever say to you, oh, by the way, we gotta keep track of this so I can sign off on all the work you've done? Because if all you did was, quote, testing with him for the last 9
No,
years.
I did all plumbing, it wasn't just testing.
Well, okay, as far as the 1099s, it was all work with the same advanced testing services.
Correct.
So,
And he maintained a master plumber, I mean,
exactly, but that master plumber is the one that you're working with. He's the one that has to sign off on your master
Right.
plumber. See what
Right.
I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
But he never once said to you, oh, by the way, we need to keep track of this.
He
So-
really didn't, because he knew I was keeping track, and I think once
Okay.
the time came, like, he knew I was keeping track, you know, that,
Okay.
I was the one keeping track.
All right, so you're keeping track, which I see all these copies of your scribbled notes.
Yes.
What we're getting at, that's why we asked for W-2.
I understand.
Because we're looking for official hours of, if there was, I don't care, print out documentation of all your weekly paychecks, that works too. But
Mm-hmm. Sure.
we're consolidating to a W-2.
Gotcha.
See, that's why
I
we're saying
wish,
that.
I wish he would
So,
have done that.
if you had all those hours done, you get 5,000 hours, that's all spitted out on a W-2.
Right.
You're doing a 1099, which still works, but the 1099 doesn't show us the hours.
That's why I have
Well,
all the
I know,
documentation.
but these are handwritten,
Yeah,
yeah, these are handwritten,
they are.
and you could have wrote them yesterday, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
I'm
I
not
have
saying
these-
you did, I'm just saying.
I understand
We're
that.
looking for certification of your hours,
I
that's
understand
what
that.
we're looking
But these
for.
everything on there is also in these emails, which I had on a drive, which I submitted to Andy. But you can go in there, and you can see the email. I can't go back and change an email that I sent in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. They're
And-
all
and
there.
at that point, your master signed off.
And
on
I
all
wish
that.
we had W-2s, but since I don't have the W-2s, all the receipts are right here. I
No,
literally
no,
have-
no, I don't need receipts, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay,
You're a journeyman. You have a master.
Mm-hmm.
He has to sign off on those hours. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for his initials or name or signature every year that you did X amount of hours. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
That's all I'm looking for.
well, I can get them, I didn't know that was required, because
Well, how do we someone has to sign off that you did 5,000 hours under a master. That's all we're looking for.
okay.
How do we prove that? That's all
Well,
I'm
the
looking
proof,
at.
because I'm not allowed to legally submit a backflow test in the city unless I'm under a master plumber.
Exactly. So
And
every
I've done
time,
8,000 of them, does that, I mean, in and of itself proves that I've been working under his license. He
That's
would pull a permit,
that's correct.
I would
So
do the
We're just
work.
looking for proper documentation of those hours.
which if I'd have known, it was, again, I didn't find out for 9 years.
Well, that's why I go
required.
back to 2012.
Right.
You have a master's examination test from
Yeah.
2012.
Well, I took that test in 2012.
Exactly. That meant you were working for a master to get your quote 5,000 hours to take the test,
Right,
to get your master's.
right.
But then you started it all back over again.
Well, they gave me 0 credit for any of my time. But
Because
like the
of
master,
record keeping?
it wasn't up to par then because of, which is why I had to start all over again. So I did have all those hours.
Right.
And it's like, oh, damn, I got to start all over again. So
Yeah.
I started all over again.
I fully
And
understand.
I was not happy about starting all over again, but I did what was required, and here 10 years later, I'm standing here
Yeah,
again.
That's basically where we're at. I mean,
Okay.
it's.
So do you
it's-
need anything else? Like,
It's
do
the
you need the-
documentation that's been, as he said,
Signed off from the
notarized and
plumber.
signed by the master.
Okay.
That said, yes, you've done these hours for the last 8 years,
Okay.
type of thing.
Mr. Yaros, there's a lot of information here to review.
Sure.
And we appreciate your due diligence on bringing all this to us, but this is a lot. So we're gonna have to go through, look at this, and then if we need more information from you, we will request it.
Okay.
Okay, so, but this is a lot, obviously, we
Oh,
gotta
I
go
know.
through, this is a lot of stuff to look at.
Believe me, I wish I could have said, here's W-2 showing
Sure.
however many hours.
But
And the best I could do what I had is,
understand.
I could leave all this with you as well, and I have a zip drive, if anybody would like, that has literally the same as this, that you can. if
We'll let
anybody
you
needs
know, we'll definitely notify you, but we have to review all this stuff, and it's gonna take some time. So
understand.
we appreciate you coming today.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we'll let you know
Can
in
I,
writing.
should I just leave these, do you
Uh,
want to keep these, or leave them with the code enforcement, or?
Why don't you leave them with code enforcement, and if we need to look at them, we can look at them, and then we can return them.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you so much.
Thank you.
Ron, just leave me one copy of each, and I can scan it and forward it to the board as well.
One copy of each.
Are those separate, or do you want? I'll talk to you after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're still under the section of public comment. Second on the public comment list is Kurt Cosmatine. He would like to address the board about an appeal on 2-7 with the attached letter in the agenda. Mr. Cosmatine, if you'd like to come up to the podium, please.
Well, good afternoon.
Could you, speak into the mic, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Can you speak into the little
Oh,
more
okay.
into the mic? Thank you.
That's better. I'm just looking up. Okay, well, I'm here today for a couple things, but basically it's to make it very clear. That's why all the information I gave you shows that I've had 50 years in the plumbing business. Licensed in Pennsylvania, California, Virginia, had businesses in all those places. Not only did I do that during that time period, but my most recent endeavor was I worked for the largest mechanical contractor in the state of North Carolina. I was assigned an $8 million project, the renovation of Jacksonville Airport, and I also worked at Camp Lejeune. But the point of all that, with the letters, which of recommendation, which were unsolicited, put a smile on my face. They're just paper to you, but they mean something. So my integrity over the years has been excellent. But we had some issues. And by the way, I've never had an issue with anything in the plumbing business for 50 years. I never had a discrepancy with a inspector. I pulled permits. So I've been down the road. I remember when Dave Calvano was the inspector, the last job he did, the last job he inspected was a large job. And he looked at it and he goes like this, he goes, perfect. And that was a great way to last time see Dave. He was great, but there are some issues here. First of all, this job on 8th Street was started. There was 2 apartments, or what I thought would be considered apartments, and I only pulled a permit for the one because I thought it was an A-B thing, like you have just 2 apartments. I didn't know it was a separate address for the second apartment, so we corrected that. Got a permit for the second floor. This job on Cranberry, there was a permit pulled for it. I posted it in the job trailer itself on the window. Zach came in at one point or another. The city inspected it. They were upset that I didn't give them 24-hour notice, but they sent me a letter about that I didn't give them 24-hour notice, but I wasn't aware that years ago he didn't have to do that.
24 hours notice for what?
I'm sorry,
24 hours notice for what?
for inspections.
For inspection.
So there was a permit pulled. It should be record of that, I would certainly think. And I posted the job trailer. 957 East 26th. Oh, this is one, I guess, I'm sure you all know Great Lakes Excavating. They do a lot of work in the city here. Great Lakes Excavating, sorry, gotta stay closer. They called me about a Parliament Country Fair where they had to replace, I don't know, I'm guessing 20 feet of sewer line because it was rotted out on the bottom of the cast iron. So they called me, I pulled a permit, went down there. They had dug up the pipe installed and they had a Fernco coupling on there, which, as Zach pointed out, wasn't acceptable anymore, even though that's what we typically have always used. So they changed the band. They are not plumbers, they are not anything else, but they're very talented people that have done this sort of thing for decades. So that's
Can I ask
all.
a question, Mr. Gosling?
Yeah, go ahead.
at the country fair in question, who installed the pipe in the ditch?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes.
I
Okay.
wasn't there. I
So-
showed up when the job was done because they said they needed a permit, and I called to meet the inspector.
So what you're saying is you filed a plan for a company that didn't have, you filed a permit for a company that did not have a license or registered plumbers to do that work? Is that what you're saying?
We've done it. I've worked with them for 20 years.
Okay.
Typically, we don't do any work in the city,
Okay.
but Great Lakes does work in the city, and so having them do that, I didn't think anything of it. But by the time I got there, the pipe was already installed. Otherwise, I could have put it in for 20 feet of pipe.
Understood. But you do realize that's a violation of the UCC code?
Yeah, I understand. I'm just explaining how things have been and how things had been for the past, my entire career. Even with the city of Erie, I always had a great standing with them. Moving on, this is interesting. Let's see, this is the new building going up in Charlton Cascade, a detail shop. We had a drip on the sewer test, thought we fixed it. As he said, I capped it. No, I put epoxy. I don't know how I called or how Zach would have been called before I checked it, but he showed up and there was still a drip. But so an issue is made out of this drip. I can tell you, years ago in my career, if there was a drip, rather than waste the time to come back, I was trusted enough, like Terry Heath or Tom Sontag, the inspectors, they say, well, fix it. You're good. So that's what would happen if there was a drip. No one would come back for just a drip, which can be easily fixed. I could have cut the pipe out, but it was my decision to cap it. And as it turned out, it didn't work, so we took the piece out. So that's all.
And then you had it re-inspected, correct?
What's that?
You had it re-inspected after you corrected the leak?
Yeah. I re-inspected. The gas test was only tested up to the valve, which I didn't know was in the off position. I had my helper pump the thing up to 5 pounds, but Zach wanted 10 pounds, which I'd never heard of. The gas company only requires 5. So he had to make a couple trips there, partially my fault, but by and large, there's really no super issue, a drip. Okay, this job's interesting. 423 Poplar. I pulled a permit for Josh Way, W-A-Y. He's a journeyman plumber, and he wanted to replace the water piping at 423 Poplar.
Could you give me that name again, please? Josh?
Josh Way, W-A-Y. He wanted to replace, told me he's replacing the water line. I said, okay, I got a permit. Never met the owner, which is what it says here. I never met the owner. I only met Josh in time to give him a permit. But when Zach went there, other stuff had been done, which I think was partially from the homeowner, could have been partially Josh, but my knowledge, I was asked to get a water line replacement permit, repipe the house. So that's what the permit for that was. And I was never able to contact him again. I said, well, I got an issue here. I'm being fined a couple $100 for your wrongdoing. You know, if he was going to replace more piping, or if the homeowner had replaced the piping, they should have told me, but they did not. So I never met them. I was never at the site.
Do you feel that that's dangerous to pull a permit for someone that you're not aware of what they're doing and they're not involved with your business? You bear the responsibility of public safety when you control a master's license and file permits. Don't you feel worried or concerned that someone might use a torch and solder a shower valve in the wall, catch the house on fire, and burn the place down? I mean, that's a public safety
That's the
issue.
first and only time I've done that.
I understand that, but that's never been legal. You're not legally allowed to file permits for people who who are not in your employ. And that-
He has 10 years in the business, you know. so-
I understand, but you do realize that that's not allowed, is my point. You can't file a permit because someone come and asked you. You have to either perform that work or journeymen who are employed by you.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Okay, I just want to make sure,
yeah.
I just want to know that you know that. I just want to make sure that you understand that.
Of course I do.
Okay. Go ahead and continue.
Not only have I done plumbing, but I worked in international marketing in Holland and London, and which added more to my knowledge of such, but while still pursuing my plumbing career part of that time. But anyway, so much for my personal stuff. 423 Poplar, that was what I'm talking about.
Can I ask you another question, Mr.
Yeah, go
Constantine?
ahead.
Is there a specific appeal that you're coming here today to ask of us, or is there something specific you're coming to ask from us?
I'm hard of hearing, even with my hearing aids. Let me.
I'll say it a little louder. Is there something specific today that you're coming to ask the board on your appeal? Is there something you want action taken or done by this board?
I want you to recognize that these infractions, what's the whole story behind them.
Okay,
I'm retiring within this year,
okay.
so I've had enough enough.
I understand. The ruling from this board was you had a 30-day suspension, which
Yeah.
expires Thursday.
I know.
So after Thursday, you're good to go. We're not recognizing that you control a master's license. We recognize that you're qualified under having that license. The action that we took from this board was because of the infractions that were submitted by the inspector.
I realize that. That's where I
Okay.
just disagree and try to explain that I'm
Okay.
not an ignorant fool after 50 years in this business.
Understood. No, I'm not calling you that. I'm just saying that's why we took the action that we took.
Also, keep in mind, I worked for the rich and the famous, the man who owned Jack Kent Cook, who owned Chrysler Building, James Taylor, the singer, and many others. So I just can't make it clear enough that I've been there.
Okay.
You know, so I know a bunch of you, I don't want to be thought illy of like I'm trying to screw the department, because that's not the truth.
Okay.
So I
Understood.
just want to make it clear that I'm not an idiot.
No one ever said that you were.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, we thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment today? Any other public comment? Any comment from the inspectors today? Seeing that there's none, the public comment section is closed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So moved. We're going to move on in the agenda to the secretary report, please.
Secretary report, the list of active retired master electricians were forwarded to Matt Shawcam on February 8th, 2023. Mr. Shawcam obtained a master electrician bill first as of February 14th, 2023. 30-day suspension letter was hand-delivered and mail certified mail to Kurt Kosmite on February 9th, 2023.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for the secretary report. We have some correspondence I was given at the last minute. Hang on one second here. Okay. We had some correspondence to the board. Mr. Michael Stinson contacted the office requesting information to obtain a master plumbing license. Mr. Stinson was entered into our system in 1993, but never obtained a license in the city of Erie. I requested a letter from Mr. Stinson before we could proceed. I will need the board to make a decision on the license status that Mr. Stinson will be eligible to apply for. A side note, Mr. Stinson talked to Christy Williams from the code office. So that's the correspondence section. We'll have to make a decision on that. We'll have to go through his letter and make a decision on that at a later date. Under old business, there's nothing under old business. Oh, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. There is action under old business. Andrew Seifert's application was approved. Eligibility to test letter was sent to Mr. Seifert on 2/8/23. Andrew Vorshik, the board had no ruling on his application, pending clarification on certification dates, and missed items on verification pages were requested. Mr. Vorshik was notified on the board's decision via phone and follow-up email on 2/8. I've received correspondence from Mr. Vorshik for the board to review. Do we want to have discussion on that, or? Is the code office satisfied with the information that he provided?
Yes, he provided W-2s from
W-2s?
2017 until 2021 to show proof of employment with Aero Electric.
Okay, so he has W-2s for the 5 years.
Yes, and he also submitted a letter from his employer clarifying the certification dates and why they were not going in sequence.
They weren't in sequence.
Right.
Understood. If you remember, those certification dates, they didn't line up numerically in the years,
Oh, yeah.
remember?
They never
Um,
get the one before the other.
Right. So pending, other than the blank verifier spot, the code office is satisfied that he proved his W-2s and the rest of the certifications that he submitted?
Yes,
So he just needs to resubmit his verifier.
right. He just needs to get an additional master to sign off on the ones that were missing.
Someone
Current
else.
master
Yeah.
didn't feel comfortable with signing off on those items because he didn't directly see him perform those duties, so he didn't want to sign off on them.
Mr. Zeeby, do you have any questions? No? He's the one that works for Arrow. He worked for Arrow. Yeah.
That letter, it states that Chris DePlasto wrote a recommendation for Andrew from verifying the other tasks that are not initial. Well, he needs to actually sign it and resubmit that form.
Sign the letter.
Well, Chris DePlacido is gonna be signing off on the remaining balance
Okay.
of requirements.
Well-
So that needs to be done, right?
I guess the item in question is, if he gets the verification on that, do we approve it? Is that what you're asking, Brett?
Well, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, you need to have a master electrician sign off on those items that aren't signed off on.
Right, understood.
So
So
having a letter doesn't, he needs to complete that form.
do you want to make a motion that if he completes that, then he can go ahead with the exam? As long as he gets his verifier completed?
Yeah, that, I'll make a motion to that verification of the completed items from a master electrician be completed on his verification form that were, quote, blank.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is by Mr. Sessler is that as long as Mr. Vorshik provides the blank verifier certification, he will be eligible to take the exam. That is the motion on the floor.
Second,
A second by Mr. Schaaf.
Grego.
Oh, I thought it was second by Mr. Grego. I thought it was Mr. Schaaf. I heard it that way. I'm sorry. Is there any questions on this motion?
Does he have to resubmit, anything that is notarized by the master as witness?
He would have to resubmit the verifier page
Right.
with the
verification
jurat,
page.
correct?
It's
Or,
gonna have to be yes, it's gonna have to be an additional verifier page.
okay, so he has to resubmit the entire verifier page with the jurat.
Correct.
And that has to be notarized? Is that notarized then?
The jurat is notarized, yes. Is there any other questions on this motion? Any other questions on the motion? All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? So moved. The motion passes. Okay, under new business, review, approve electrical applications.
There are none to give.
We don't have any?
No,
No plumbing?
no.
Okay, there's no applications to review or approve this month. If there's no other, Mr. Panitsky.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, one thing. Andy wanted to address the board.
Oh! Mr. Zimmerman.
Just a quick, we have been having trouble with masters not providing the correct verifier. They're not signing off, some are saying no. So I would like the board to come up with a letter that would go to that master that they're jeopardizing theirs and that they would be called in and question why they're not signing off on these verifiers.
Can you be more specific about what they're doing? They're not,
They're not signing off.
so
telling
they're
you
filling them out but not signing them and turning them in?
they're not doing anything. Some. And we're having an issue with that they're not cooperating. Yes.
So what I'm getting the gist of it is that they don't want one of their employees taking a master's test.
I can't say that.
I mean, but that is something that could happen if they're not doing that, correct?
I can't say that. But there are some masters that are not signing the verifier that they've completed work, that their employees completed work or
Are
subcontractors.
journeymen filing complaints about they're not receiving a verifier when they ask? Is that an issue?
Yes.
Okay.
When the employee goes to their master and says, can you sign these verifiers that have done this work? They're not doing it. Some
Okay.
won't do it. And so, to me, they need to be called on the carpet.
Okay.
And I would like to see the board at least send a form letter for us that we could send to that master, warning them, if you don't cooperate, then your license is going to be looked at
Do you want
and
us,
reviewed.
do you want us to craft a letter and approve it at next month's meeting?
You can if you wish.
Okay.
Or we could, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If you want to craft that, that's fine.
We actually need to meet.
I mean, that's, just personally, I'm saying, I don't really understand why someone that's a journeyman in the employ of a master why someone would want to hold them back from being able to do that, to better
Agreed.
themselves. That's absolutely ridiculous, and they should not be allowed to do that.
That's why I would like to see their license be called on the carpet, that they would come in front of the board and
Okay.
explain to the board why they're doing that.
We'll craft a letter and we'll approve it at next month's meeting, and then we'll send it out to every master and let them know that if someone makes a complaint against them, they're going to come see us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, I have a question about that.
Sure, go ahead,
How
Mr.
can you
Moore.
hold a master accountable for not signing off on something that he didn't witness?
Well, if-
That's different.
That's different.
That's
After
different.
working for someone for 7 years, that master's not signing off because he doesn't want to lose a good employee. And that guy gets his master, he's got to go start his own business. Plumbers, electricians, it happens.
Now,
But who's
You
to
know.
stop that master from saying, I never saw him do that?
Well,
well,
In 7
that's,
years of employment.
that's the verification process.
okay, that's fine. If a master plumber says to us that the journeyman I have he doesn't have enough experience, in my opinion, I'm not signing it. That's one thing. But that person applying needs to be told, your master says that you're not you don't have the skills to be taking the master's exam. He won't sign it because he can't verify and he's not gonna risk his name on his license to do that. And that's fine, but that person needs to be notified that their master said, you're not eligible. And I think that's what we're getting at here, right,
Yeah,
Andy?
because, I mean, that's part of the situation with this Voracek guy. Because in the paperwork that he sent in, he's saying, okay, Dan Case said, okay, he doesn't have the qualifications. He left those 4 items blank.
He didn't know, is what,
No, that's not what the paperwork says.
according to the
He
discussion.
didn't verify.
Well, I'm
And
sorry.
then D. Placido, who was the foreman, says he can verify it, but he's not a master. So how is he gonna verify the information? So if he's gonna need another master to verify this information for us, we'll never get it. Because he works for Dan Case.
Dan Cass, yeah.
Cass? So how is this guy's being held back?
Here's what the issue is on that, from what I understand. That he is employed in a master, but when you're employed by a master, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will work with that master at all times. So you may work with another, if you're an apprentice or a journeyman, you may work with other journeymen, and that master might not necessarily know every single thing that you've done. So that master has to rely on his employees that are co-workers or journeymen to say, Mr. Smith has completed all these things. I don't know about this. Can you please let me know if he's qualified? So I think that was the gap there for Mr. Vorshik. And Christie verified that with Mr. Katz, that he said, I just don't know. And they verified that with their employees. So,
If there's ever a question on that, if, say they were holding the guy back because they said that he didn't work on, 3-phase ever, Andy, or would they be able to provide proof on their own of a job that they did, that they've worked on, something like that? I mean, if they're being held back,
They would have to have some type of evidence that they have, a journeyman that they've worked for and verified. The case that I was referring to is, we've had 3 employees that he would not sign off on. So that's throwing a red flag at us, big time. And Christie could call the master and ask, why didn't you check these 2 boxes? Why don't you feel he's eligible to take the master's test or journeyman's test for that fact? But it's more where we see a pattern, then we're going to call it, we're going to question. And so but a lot of you come from the different trades, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and so you kind of got a good feeling of what work is out there, what knowledge needs to, and you can actually question the applicant on their knowledge of, say, a 3-phase. The floor's wide open for it. It's just where we see a pattern and 3 employees come to us and say he won't sign off.
well, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah, because he's legitimately holding,
He's holding people back, yes.
right, if they take the exam and they fail, so be it. Right? If they take the exam and fail, so be it. Right?
Yes.
So,
But we still, it's blatant, and he's not even filling out the verifier form.
right, no, that needs to be,
It needs to be addressed.
yes, and we will.
But other applicants that are missing a few things, I mean, we can do a little bit of homework before they get to you. Why didn't you check this box? So,
Okay. Thank you. Well, Mr. Panitsky,
anybody else?
would you like to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn is on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Collins. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We'll see you next month. Thank you.